I used to be very into metal music. I used to go see a lot of metal and punk bands. I would go to shows a lot with friends, but on one night I went out expecting to see friends, or at least somebody I knew. I spent a long time walking around and didn't actually see anyone, which was a bit of a surprise. It was somewhere I went a lot and just expected to see people. After a while of walking around, a very cute girl asked me to take a picture of her group of friends. I stopped and took a picture and we chatted, and we got on really well, and we ended up speaking for most of the night. We didn't swap numbers or anything because I had a girlfriend at the time, but we saw each other a couple of times after that. We saw each other more and more, and eventually it worked out and we got together. And we've been together a long time since then.
The only time Honeybits ever got detention was in first grade when she and her friend got pencils for their birthdays during lunch. They started tapping them together when a teacher came over to them, pulled them aside, and gave them detention for fighting with pencils. Honeybits and her friend were given a recess detention, but when they explained what happened to the vice principal, they were just laughed at and sent outside to play. 4 years later, that same teacher gave Honeybits' sister detention for not smiling. Just 2 years ago, Honeybits was happy that the Karma Police visited the teacher when she was fired and arrested for going to school drunk. For her 11th birthday, Pandora had a really big birthday party with a huge cake. Written in the frosting was, "Happy birthday, baby girl!" In the middle of the night, Pandora and her friends got hungry. They snuck downstairs to get food, but it turned out that her dad had the same idea. However, unlike them, he was naked and eating her leftover birthday cake. Kind up to you to decide which one's worse. As soon as her friends saw him, they ran away, but Pandora just stood there, shocked. To this day, Pandora and her dad still can't have a birthday without thinking of that moment.
Shima was in 8th grade. She was head over heels in love with a guy she had never even spoken to. After months of obsessing, she finally found the courage to go up to him and admit her feelings. Shima stared at him as she blurted out the words as quickly as possible. And at that moment, another girl walked over and gave Shima's crush a huge kiss on the cheek. She looked at Shima and said, "Who's this bitch?" Shima's crush coldly replied,
"I don't know, some random wannabe."
Shima was so heartbroken that she stayed the hell away from boys and put all of her energy into her studies. And I guess that's how she got so smart.
Hellbent worked at a local KFC as a cashier, and the customers never did anything weird. But one day, a drive-thru employee came in late for his shift and put a backpack down. Hellbent didn't think anything of it until he pulled out a mannequin hand and threw it in the deep fryer for 15 seconds. He then pulled the mannequin hand out and tried eating it. That was the last day he ever showed up for work.
When Spencis was in 6th grade, she had a boyfriend who wouldn't leave her alone, and she couldn't be away from him at school or else he'd get mad. So she decided to break up with him by telling him that her goldfish died and that she needed some time to herself. He didn't believe her, so Spencis invited him to a fake funeral at the park. She got a dead fish from Walmart and faked the whole thing. It worked, and now she's in a happy new relationship with Tulip.
Melissa was going for a run one day when a man stopped her. He told her that he would pay her $100 to kick him in the leg and break it so he could go to the hospital. The plan was that he wanted to tell his mom that he was going for a jog and fell. The reason was because his mom told him that he had to go and run. He figured the only way he could get out of it was if he was injured. So Melissa agreed to do it and ended up hurting him really bad. Though she got the $100, she regrets doing it to this day.
One day, Melissa was leaving work when she noticed she had 6 missed calls from an unknown number. Melissa thought this might be an urgent call from her mom's work number, so she called the number back. The woman answered right away and shouted,
"When are you guys delivering that dildo?"
She sounded really distressed, like it was a matter of life and death. Melissa had to awkwardly explain that the woman had the wrong number. She later found out why the mix-up had happened. Her number was only one number different from a local sex shop's phone number.
Pandora was walking through the park one day when a lady randomly asked her to pick up all the pretty rocks and give them to her. The lady offered her $20 to do it, and since she was kind of in need of money for a new phone, she accepted. Later, Pandora gave the rocks to the lady who then paid her, and they both left. The next day, Pandora went back to the park and the lady was there again. She waved to the lady, and the lady made the same offer, rocks for $20. Pandora accepted once again. That went on for about a week or so when she found out that the lady was just throwing the rocks into the pond. Pandora didn't complain though, since she got the money that she needed to buy a phone. My friend Dolan has always been searching for the truth, even when he was little. Like one time, he wanted to know all about what happened when he was born. He asked his mother if they cut the umbilical cord when he came out. His mother told him they sure did, and Dolan said,
Oh, that's why my penis is so small.
when Dolan thinks back on this, he melts into a big puddle of cringe.
When Honeybits was 11, she and her little sister had to live with their aunt and cousin for a month. When their aunt made school lunches, she would give her own daughter a sandwich, piece of fruit, a drink, and a big snack. But Honeybits and her sister would only get a tiny apple and a tangerine. She wouldn't even give them breakfast, so they had to get through a whole day of school on just 2 tiny pieces of fruit. Worse still, one night their aunt decided Honeybits' sister was being too noisy, so she gagged her with a sock and duct taped her hands and feet together. When her mom came back, Honeybits told her about everything their evil aunt did. This caused a huge family fight, and they still don't speak to this day. Amazingly, before they walked out, Honeybits' aunt tried to charge her sister for the kids' food and board. But Honeybits' mom just laughed and said, "Food? You didn't even feed them." I guess you can't choose your family.
Salty Squid and his friends were at a convention with a very tight security, so they thought they were safe. They were safe, but only up until the last few hours when a random man came into the convention hall and shouted, "I have a bomb!" He pulled out a homemade C4 explosive and said, "I will go boom!"
What the fuck?
Everyone was afraid, but a few cosplayers were able to use their props as weapons to hit the man. The man fell to the floor and security came and took him away. The bomb was later found to be fake, but the man ended up being banned from other conventions, big or small. It was an adrenaline-pumping experience for Salty Squid and his friends, especially as they watched others beating the man with their props.
One night, when Honeybits was only a few months old, her mother couldn't sleep since her father failed to return home after a few drinks with the guys. She was worried sick and couldn't stop staring at the clock in the kitchen. Suddenly, she heard a loud boom! She ran outside in the rain with Honeybits strapped on a harness attached to her chest. Just as she feared, her father crashed into a garage just a block away. Her father, drunk off his ass, stumbled out of the car and started to walk away as if he thought he'd parked the car. Her mother grabbed him and tried to lead him home. Frightened, her father screamed and started to sob, "Get away from me! No, no, please!" Shocked and confused, her mother tried to sush him since it was almost 4 a.m. He tried to fight her off and made an attempt to run for it, but her mother grabbed him by the ponytail and covered his mouth. Her father kept screaming for help all the way back inside the house. Even when he was finally home, he continued to scream for help. Her mother tried to calm him down, but he just kept threatening her and telling her to stay away because he's a loyal married man. Her father didn't even recognize his own wife. The police took away his car and driver's license, and he had to go to court the next day.
One time, Hellbent's brother locked a door on their dad. Locking doors was against the rules in their house, so naturally their dad got pissed. But it was Hellbent who got in trouble, since he had a bad habit of always locking doors. As punishment, Hellbent had to run around the neighborhood in only his boxers. While running, he had to constantly shout,
I hate my penis!
Moji's friend in preschool was talking about sex when the teacher walked over, concerned, and asked her if she, really knew what sex was. And Moji's friend replied, "It's when a man wearing black breaks into your house," she began, which was already enough for a teacher to call her parents, but then she continued with, "Then he chokes you, and you wake up as a baby." Kinky. Gooby and her husband, me, were on a holiday once, and we stopped by a bar. Gooby didn't have anything to drink, but I drank bottle after bottle of beer. At the end of the night, Gooby waited in the car while I finished my drink. She saw me stumble into the parking lot and then disappear. Apparently, according to her afterwards, I got into a car and gave the driver a big smooch. It was only when she screamed and I turned around to see 3 scared kids in the back seat that I realized I wasn't in the right car. I apologized and got out of the car as quickly as I could. It's a wonder she's still with me.
This didn't happen to me, but to Dolan's brother. He, for a period of time, loved eating raw onions. He would ask for a cup of onions on the side with his burger at restaurants. During that time period, he got into eating wasabi. Just plain wasabi, not even on sushi or anything. Even today, he eats wasabi and spices on their own.
Doopy was 5 at the time when she and her mum went to go visit the grave of one of her mum's old friends. So Doopy was walking along, avoiding tombs. All of a sudden, the guy that works there starts talking to her. He got all up in the dead people conversation. How it's pretty funny looking at people's funerals, ha 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 ha. Everybody looks so sad, ha ha ha. She just wanted to leave until he added that he wished he could live long enough to be at her funeral. That's when Doopy decided to run to her mum and get the fuck out of there.
Dolan was in the park opposite of his house one time when he heard a loud bang. He looked around, but there was nothing unusual, so he kept playing with his friends. They heard it again, and this time they could see a figure holding a gun and pointing it at him. He ran back to his house and looked out of his window, but nothing was there. It was like it never happened. 2 days later, he was sitting in his room when he casually looked out of the window, and there in the park was the gunman pointing his gun at his window. He hid, rubbed his eyes, and looked back out. The gunman was gone again. He never saw him again. When Gergak was 5 years old, he was a really fussy eater. He refused to eat any fruit, especially grapes. So Gergak's sister came up with a genius plan. She told him that there was a nerve in the back of his tongue that made everything taste like chocolate. As soon as Gergak heard this, he ran to the fridge looking for some food to test it out. The only thing they had in the house was Gergak's arch nemesis, grapes. He didn't want grapes, but he did want chocolate, so he reluctantly ate a grape. He immediately realized that his sister's chocolate nerve story was total bullshit! But he also discovered that grapes weren't that bad. He was too picky to try them before, but he quickly decided he liked them.
The weirdest thing Melissa's 10-year-old sister does is bark at everyone and everything. At the store, she'll run up to strangers to bark and growl at them. She won't answer to her real name, so Melissa has to call her by her dog name, Scarlet. She uses Scarlet, the dog, as her username for everything online. Melissa's sister even barks at Melissa's dog and claims she understands her, then chews on the dog toy.
One time, Salty Squid was bored at camp, so he decided to teach himself how to backflip off a tree. Every day he practiced in secret until he was finally ready to show the group. He gathered everyone and told them that he was going to show them something awesome. With 15 pairs of eyes on him, he ran at the tree as hard as he could. He went to plant his foot into the tree trunk like he practiced, but he completely missed it. He ended up crashing and completely KOing himself. He was so embarrassed because he basically gathered everyone to watch him run into a tree.
Last year, Dolan's brother had a long day at work, but he couldn't sleep. At about 3 a.m., he decided to try to nod off. It took a while until he finally got to sleep, but maybe after an hour, he woke up after having a nightmare. Dolan's brother woke up to the image of what looked like his mother, who had passed away about 3 years prior. She was standing at the edge of his bed, but her head was the head of a large boar, sewn on by razor wire, blood seeping from the stitching. Dolan's brother tried to make a noise, but he couldn't. Suddenly, the thing opened its mouth, and it let out a half-human pig scream that made him go cold. He couldn't move, breathe, or do anything but stare in horror. He then snapped out of it, and his fiancée was shaking him, as it turned out that Dolan's brother was talking in his sleep. This was not surprising, as he often had nightmares. But what surprised him was that his older brother, who was about 28 at the time, called and told him about a dream that he had had, which was exactly like his, and that the only difference was that it said something to him. Go help your brother. The dream still freaks out Dolan's brother to this day.
Melissa was with her friends, waiting to see a school play. Her crush was there too. With his friends, she was chatting up with him and things were going good. He had some chips with him and she took a few to be playful. Playing around, he gawked and demanded she give them back. Melissa proceeded to eat the chips, but he still had his hand out waiting. So, she decided it would be cool to spit them out right on his hand. They both just stared at the mess. He had his jaw open, and his friend who saw the whole thing just said, "Dude, your art kids are weird." The doors to the play opened, so Melissa rushed in feeling so embarrassed, and her friends just laughed at her. Although she did eventually get together with her crush, she found that he was actually impressed and thought she was a badass. They've been together for 3 years.
Melissa was in the 4th grade. Her and a friend found a baby bird who'd fallen out of its nest near the playground. So they put it in her friend's hat and took it to class after recess. When the teacher saw everybody in the class around them, the teacher naturally became suspicious. When she came over and saw Melissa and her friend with the featherless baby bird with 3 twigs and a leaf in a hat, she became upset at first, but then made them give it to her. The next day of class, she had it in one of those small, plastic pet containers you put hermit crabs in, with pretty legit looking bedding, a small light bulb for warmth, and cloth as a blanket. She made it the class project for everyone to take care of it, and she would take it home with her. A few weeks later, when it had all of its feathers and the teacher had helped it learn how to fly, Melissa and her class let it go at recess and watched it fly away. They later learned that from its color patterns, it was a starling.
When Hellbent was 6 weeks into freshman year of high school, he got detention for changing the school's bell to the Rickroll meme. Hellbent went onto the server and hacked his way through the basic principal security and made it to the program. He was playing solitaire on his computer while running the program in the background for the duration of about 6 minutes. Never gonna give you up, never gonna let you down, never gonna run around and desert you. Played over and over for the entire school. For that prank, Hellbent expected to be expelled but only received a detention.
Back in the days before caller ID, Slapped Ham used to pick names with addresses from the phone book to prank call. He'd call them and say he was from the local electricity company and that a nearby accident had crossed the power lines with the phone lines. He said a technician was untangling the mess and that it was critical they didn't answer their phone for the next 2 hours. If they did, the person calling them could be zapped by heavy voltage. Once the person on the other line accepted the story, Slapped Ham would hang up and wait. A few minutes later, he would call back to see if they'd pick up. If they didn't answer, Slapped Ham would just keep calling and calling until they got so annoyed by the non-stop ringing that they had to pick it up. As soon as they said hello, Slapped Ham would scream like he was getting painfully electrocuted and listen to the person on the other end freak out. Froggy was 17. She needed a case of beer for a party. There was a guy who would usually hang out in the bushes behind the convenience store and sell booze to Froggy and her classmates. He said he would give Froggy the beer if she did him a favor when he needed one. She agreed, and a year later, she ran into the man who asked for a favor. Froggy had to accompany him to dinner at his parents' house. When nobody was looking, she had to sneak into their bedroom and steal a boxed Tickle Me Elmo doll from their closet that they were planning on giving to their younger relative for Christmas. The man's mother made a wonderful meal, making Froggy feel bad for what she had to do, but she did. After excusing herself from the table to use the bathroom, she snuck into the bedroom and found the doll in the closet. She snuck out the window and put it in the trunk of the man's car. Then, Froggy crawled back and through the window and finished the meal without anyone suspecting a thing. While Froggy got $100 for her troubles, the man managed to sell the doll for $3 grand. As a child, Shima would often hang out with her brother and his boyfriend. They all got along together, but Shima didn't really understand their relationship until she got older. One night, she was passing by her brother's room and she heard moaning. Curious, Shima pressed her ear to the door, when her brother suddenly yelled, "Strike me like a bitch!" Completely confused, Shima ran off to the bathroom. Later in life, the boyfriend explained to her about how her brother was a masochist. Amazing.
One time Pandora started dating this guy who seemed really sweet and normal. On their 1-week anniversary, he invited her over to watch movies. Everything was going really well until Pandora excused herself to use the bathroom. On her way back, she quickly looked in his room to check it out. On the dresser, she found a photoshopped picture of the two of them. In the picture, Pandora was wearing a white dress from her confirmation, and her boyfriend was dressed in all black with a cigarette in his mouth. He'd photoshopped them onto an altar like it was their wedding day. For Pandora, this was a huge deal breaker. She was so creeped out that she walked straight back out and broke up with him.
When Derek was younger, he had a lot of stuffed toys, action figures, and collectibles in his room. To say he was a bit self-conscious might have been an understatement, but Derek felt like his toys were always watching him. Whenever Derek had to change his clothes, he would turn every toy around so that he didn't have to feel their judging eyes looking at him while he was naked. If he had to change quickly, he could feel the gaze and it completely freaked him out. He always imagined that they would talk about him behind his back, judging him for his disrespectful display of nudity.
For the history final at school, Shima and 2 other friends created a plan. The test was multiple choice, so they decided that if they didn't know an answer to the question, one of them would cough 2 times. Then, they went through the trouble of learning the numbers in sign language to indicate which question they needed the answer to. Shima and her friends decided not to use sign language for the choices, mostly because Shima sat next to this kid who told on anyone, and they thought he would get suspicious if he saw them signing letters to each other. So, they decided on another idea, which was to basically fake illnesses. For choice A, they sniffled. For choice B, they coughed once. For choice C, they faked a sneeze. For choice D, they sniffled twice. On the bright side, they all passed and got 100%. But on the other side, the teacher made them all go to the nurse's office because she thought they were seriously sick. Shima and her friends still used that for the other finals, and it worked like a charm.
Dolan's neighbor is completely obsessed with his award-winning lawn. It's his life's biggest achievement, so he makes sure to take ridiculously good care of it. He likes to go out and tend to it the second he gets home from work, and spends most of his weekends working on it. Dolan has seen him do all kinds of crazy stuff to it, like chasing birds off his lawn, trimming his grass during a thunderstorm, and even buying a hard hat with a light on it so he can do gardening at night. But the weirdest thing of all is when he popped his head over the fence to yell at Dolan for blowing bubbles. He said the bubbles have harsh chemicals that might kill his precious lawn. Dolan told him to get lost.
Once, when Tolop was at school, he decided to eat his sweet snacks only. He went and sat on the bench in the field, and after opening his lunch, he pulled out 10 different sweets. When he started eating them, the teacher strolled by and looked over his shoulder. She saw the 4 empty wrappers and looked at the other 6 sweets and said to him, "Haven't you read the new rule in the school diary?" Then she took all his sweets and dumped them in the bin. Tolop was in so much shock that he went up to the school principal and asked him about it. All he had to say was, "I'm sorry, but many parents are blaming us for tooth decay for selling sweets and allowing them at school." He walked away, so Tolop decided not to get angry, but to get even. He went home and planned his revenge. He made 12 batches of cupcakes, but without the sugar and salt. He put a cupcake on almost every teacher's desk with a little note on the bottom of the cupcake paper saying, "Since sweets are banned, I made all the teachers sugarless cupcakes so they aren't sweets anymore. Enjoy!" The ban was lifted and the principal gave Tolop a detention, but also thanked him.